So hello everybody, we're getting really close to the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season now, and you can really tell that if you take a look out at the tropics right now, because we've got three systems in the open Atlantic that are potentially going to affect land. So I was going to take a look and talk about each of them. So I'll first start with Florence. So this is Tropical Storm Florence right here. So we can see on the satellite that outflow is restricted on the south and western side of the storm, which is indicative of wind shear. So that's one reason why it's a tropical storm right now and not a hurricane. But the National Hurricane Center is forecasting the shear to abate over the next day or two and continue moving west-northwestward to northwestward at the end of the forecast period, and continue strengthening pretty steadily because the models are suggesting that the wind shear is going to be very light or possibly even non-existent along most of this track, and the water along this forecast track here is very warm. And in fact, I mean, if this thing keeps going toward the coast, I mean, it'll hit the Gulf Stream at some point, and that's some of the warmest water in the entire Atlantic. So this is the Hurricane Center's official forecast track for Florence over the next 5 days. And one thing that's concerning is that the models, both the GFS, the American model, and the European model, their forecast tracks have been having to be adjusted further and further south over the past couple of days. So that's continuously increased the risk of a landfalling hurricane on the United States. And the Hurricane Center is forecasting this to become at a minimum, a Category 3, most likely a Category 4 hurricane by the end of the forecast period. But, you know, unless some wind shear or a dry thermodynamic environment or some other factor gets in the way of this strengthening, I mean, this theoretically could strengthen all the way to landfall along the East Coast. I would say that anybody that lives on the coast from the Georgia-South Carolina state line all the way up to Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, maybe even up to the border of North Carolina and Virginia should be monitoring this over the next few days and making plans to evacuate. So I mean, if you know anybody that lives along this coastline, I mean, now is the time to be making plans and thinking about what you're going to do if this forecast looks like it's going to verify. This is looking very similar to what Hurricane Hugo did in 1989. So Hugo made landfall along the South Carolina coast, and it basically strengthened all the way up until landfall. Once it got over that Gulf Stream water, it was just a recipe for continued strengthening right up until landfall. So it looks like something very similar could happen here. And then once it makes landfall, I mean, a few of the models are suggesting that this may stick around at least a little bit and give some rainfall to a lot of folks up the East Coast, like near Washington, D.C. and Maryland and that area. I mean, it's too soon to say where exactly this is going to go, but it looks like the biggest threat from strong and damaging winds is going to be along the coast of the Carolinas, but further north of that, could potentially have some pretty good rainfall effects from this. So the main effects from this are still 5, 6, 7 days out. So we're going to have to keep an eye out on this for the next few days and just see what happens. But like I said, that it's been very concerning that over the past couple of days the forecast tracks by the models have been shifting further and further south. It looked a couple of days ago like this might go between North Carolina and Bermuda and just curve back out to sea and not hurt anybody, but it's looking very, very unlikely that will happen now, unfortunately. So we've also had another tropical storm form today. So this right here is Tropical Storm Helen. So this formed pretty much immediately upon leaving the coast of Africa. And so this will affect the Cape Verde Islands right here within the next day or two. And then go west for a little ways and then start to curve back out to sea. I mean, I'm not really worried about Helen affecting the United States because it's looking pretty likely that this will traverse over the open Atlantic and then curve out to sea and not really affect anybody. This other one down here, though, this is Tropical Depression 9, and it's looking imminent that this will become Tropical Storm Isaac. That's the next name on the list. What's concerning about this storm is that it's forecast by the National Hurricane Center and by the two most reliable models to move just almost due west, maybe ever so slightly north of due west for the next 5 days. But what that does is it puts it in danger of just keeping going west and eventually entering the Caribbean and potentially, and this is a really long way out, but storms that take a track this far south can always enter the Caribbean like this and potentially always enter the Gulf. Well, not always, but a lot of the times enter the Gulf. So this is going to have to be have an eye kept on it for the next probably 2 weeks or so. We're going to have a very long time to watch this storm. So it's a tropical depression right now, forecast to become a tropical storm within the next few hours. I mean, quite honestly, on satellite, it already looks like a tropical storm. But then, forecast to become a hurricane. And if conditions are favorable, I mean, this could potentially become a major hurricane before impacting the Leeward Islands here and then entering the Caribbean. So there's a lot going on in the tropics right now. There's 3 systems, as I said. 2 of them have the potential to affect the United States. Florence is looking almost certain that Florence will have a major impact on the United States, unfortunately, upon probably the South Carolina, North Carolina coast. And then this Tropical Depression 9, which is likely to become, which I'm pretty confident saying will become Tropical Storm Isaac and then Hurricane Isaac, is going to traverse the Atlantic over the next few days and into the next probably couple of weeks, and we'll just have to keep an eye on that. So I'll update with more information as needed, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to answer them.